Hello there and welcome to Wildcard Decks, and today is an exciting video, I hope anyway, it is for me anyway, as I was able to attend a pre-release today and I was able to win, which is always good fun. So yeah, we'll go through the deck as it is, but I'll also do a bit of thoughts on some of the cards as well, probably mainly in the context of Asajj. But yeah, let's just get into it. So, what does Asajj herself do? I did go with the yellow as the third aspect, but her non-deploy action is deal 1 damage to a friendly unit, and if you do, deal 1 damage to an enemy unit in the same arena. So it is restricted in the sense that it has to be the same arena, so that does make it a little less powerful, but this is actually surprisingly flexible, and I think that red is probably going to be the way to go with her. But if you've got gritted units, then you can start to power those up. If your opponent has played a 1 health unit, then you are potentially going to be able to take it out straight away. So that's going to be very nice. But yeah, it's just I was able to get quite a lot of good use out of this front side action. And then on deploy, she comes out at 6, so a little bit late, but if you attach her to a vehicle, then that unit becomes a leader unit. It gains grit, and on attack, you may deal 1 damage to a friendly unit, and if you do, deal 1 damage to an enemy unit in the same arena. So she basically keeps her leader action or ability, and she gives the vehicle +3 and +4. So there are actually a good few targets in this deck that could well carry over into a proper Asajj deck outside of Limited. But the other option you have with Asajj as well is if you do not have a vehicle that you want to put her on, you can deploy her on the ground as a plain ground leader as a 4/6, which is understated for a 6-cost leader. However, unlike most of the other pilot leaders in this set, she does still get an ability which is grit. So I would say she does have probably a better fail-safe option than every other pilot leader in this set, pretty much. So she does have good versatility, and of course the other bonus you get if you put her on the ground as a leader unit, not attached to a vehicle, her tags will come into effect. So the most significant at the moment is going to be force. So deploy her on the ground, you can enable the full effect of force throw. You can shove a fallen lightsaber on her and get the extra ability on that. So I think Asajj does have quite a lot of flexibility, especially because of the grit that she gets as well. So yeah, overall, thus far, very early days, but I am quietly quite impressed with her. So we'll see if she is able to make a splash going forwards in proper play, so to speak, outside of Limited. So I haven't entirely figured out the format of my videos going forward, because now that we have pilots, they can be both ground units and upgrades. So do I smoosh them into the general ground units, or do I keep them separate? For now, I'm going to do ground units first, and then space, and then pilots. So we'll see if I think that format works going forward. But anyway, so most of the cards in the deck are going to be a one-of because it's a luck of what you draw on the day. But I had 2 land speeders, so it's fairly unexciting. However, this could replace Cloud Rider in set 2 Boba decks, because with that leader you can actually ambush in for 3. So yes, it's 1 less than Cloud Rider, but you have a higher chance that this will survive. So I could see that having a place in a set 2 Boba yellow deck. Guerrilla Soldier. So this has pretty good potential if you've been able to clear out their arena, or if they don't have enough health on their units to put 3 indirect damage onto it. then they're going to have to damage their base, which means this comes in ready, and then you can get another 2 damage into their base. So to remind that indirect damage in this set, your opponent or the player that is receiving the indirect damage, they get to choose where it goes. So they can put it on their units, they can put it onto base. They can't. So if we say this land speeder, let's say it's got 1 health left, the opponent would be able to choose 1 indirect damage could go on the land speeder, and then the 2 would have to go onto other units or onto base. So you can't overload a unit, it is unpreventable damage. The other thing to note about indirect damage is that it ignores shields. So if there is a shielded unit, so let's just say the land speeder is shielded, it's got 3 health. If you put indirect damage onto it, the shield remains, but the damage is done underneath. So it would be shielded and it might have 2 health left, something like that. So just something to bear in mind. And I think there is quite a few cards in this set, and also previous sets to be honest, that will be able to punish an opponent if they keep putting indirect damage on their units and leave them at only 1 health remaining. So it could be quite an interesting mechanic, and it's also not a keyword, which means it could turn up in future sets. So we'll see what happens on that front. Moff Gideon. So a 4-cost 5/4 is decent stats in and of itself. Does make him vulnerable to takedown and Fell the Dragon and open fire, but hey. But when he deals combat damage to an opponent's base, each unit that opponent plays this phase costs 1 more. So it's not even a one-off. It is a permanent effect that phase for everything they want to play. So I think this could be probably an auto-include in most yellow villainy decks, because even if you don't get into attack their base, you're still disrupting their plan, because they're going to have to deal with him. Otherwise, you're just going to keep disrupting their plans going forwards, and they're going to be potentially not being able to make use of all their resources. So yeah, Moff Gideon I think is going to be pretty powerful, and that's ignoring his aggressive stat line as well. So yeah, quite impressed with him thus far. Perimeter ATRT, just Sentinel on the ground, nothing too exciting there. Shadowed Hover Tank, so it does have Sentinel itself, however, it is going to die to most things, so it is more as an aggressive unit, which is kind of a bit backwards. The Wingguard security team, initially I wasn't too impressed with this card, but I'm going to be on the lookout for other fringe units, because it has Sentinel, which is, it's got a poor stat line for 6 resources, but when played, give a shield token to each of up to 2 fringe units. So it doesn't say other fringe units, so you can give a shield to itself, which is probably what you're going to want to do. That makes it a little bit better. But yeah, what other fringe are? I mean, we can see on here we've got a fringe Sentinel here. Now this is probably already dead by that point, but there is the potential that you'd be able to have 2 shielded Sentinels on the ground, which is not something to be sniffed at. There is also, off the top of my head, Ray from set 2 as a leader is fringe, and she comes out on 6, so you could potentially deploy her, then put this out, and then you've got Ray as a shielded leader with restore 3, which is going to be pretty nasty. So yeah, I think I'd kind of written off this card, but there might be some things that we can do. Fringe in general is probably the worst / weakest trait going, because it doesn't really have any synergy whatsoever. So yeah, we'll see if this develops at all. So into space, which is the general focus of this set. So Republic Wiring is a draft card, there's nothing to say about it really. Onyx Squadron Brute, I think this could be an auto include with Asajj, because it's got the healing 2 damage from the base, but when defeated I should say. And because of that, you would be quite happy to just use her ability on this, because you're not too fussed about it dying. It's all about timing really. But yeah, let's say they've played a 3 healthy unit on turn 1. You do Asajj, damage each one, they attack into your base, maybe, and then you just kill it off and heal the damage back from your base. So yeah, I think this might be an auto include in Asajj going forwards. Royal Security Fighter, unless you manage to put an upgrade on it or a pilot, this is basically useless outside of Asajj, I guess. With Asajj, you can play it turn 1, ping it, and then it's a 3 powered unit because of grit. But grit on something with only 2 health, as I say, is pretty awful unless you put upgrades on it. Swarming Vulture Droid. So this is only in here because I was rather lacking in early game plays. I don't think I was ever able to get more than 1 out at any one point. But this is basically gimmick the card. You can have 15 in a deck of these, and for every other Swarming Vulture Droid that you have out, it gains +1. So if you've got 5 Vulture Droids out, then it will have each Vulture Droid will have +4. So it will be a 6-2. So I say it's going to be a highly gimmick deck that can do this, but it should be a little bit of fun. And you can also Twin Suns, you normally can only have 1 copy of a card. This is an exception. You can have 15 of them in Twin Suns as well. So yeah, just a bit of fun. Zagirian Starhopper. So this is, I think, going to be an auto include in a lot of yellow villainy decks. It's also Underworld, so Cad Bane loves it, but when it dies, it deals 2 indirect damage to a player. So even if you aren't able to attack in with it, you'll still get some value out of it, which is always very useful. Contracted Jumpmaster. Villainy has been lacking in Sentinels, especially in space, so this is probably going to just flat out replace the Black Sun Starfighter from, I think it was set 2, because that only had 2 health, so it would die to 2 pings or a daring raid. Well, or perilous position as well. This will survive, so it's got much more of a delaying roadblock factor, which is generally what you're looking for with your Sentinels. And it's Underworld, so again, Cad Bane loves it. Death Space Skirmisher. So I think this will also be quite a frequent presence where you've got a good space amount of space units in your deck, because especially if you've got the initiative from the start of the game, you play your space unit, you then take the initiative, you play this out turn 2 and exhaust whatever they've deployed in their turn 1. Sure, they might have done 2 turn 1 cost units, but that's the worst case scenario really. And it's not limited to arena, so that's quite crucial as well. So that's the main reason why I think this will be quite a common and very useful card to have. Landing Shuttle, obviously this is best with Thrawn because he can double up the when defeated trigger. Onto the remaining space units that were a little bit more expensive. So Cloaked Star Viper, it comes in with 2 shields, which is a little bit interesting and different, and because of that it is quite understated. It's Underworld, so again Cad might like it, but I think outside of being a target for adding pilots onto it, I'm not sure it's going to see a whole lot of play. Yes, with Gar Saxon, it will be at 4 power for longer, but I think with 2 health, just because of perilous position and other shrinking effects, I think that's not going to be good enough in general. Rogue Class Starfighter, I think I would prefer the Contracted Jumpmaster because, again, it has more health. This only has 3 health. It will die to most things, but in the pre-release format, pretty useful still. Now, Shuttle ST-149, I'm quite excited about this one. Despite it being a single aspect, I do think it's going to have quite good utility. A few times I was able to have, where is it? The Shadowed Hover Tank out, and then play the Shuttle, and its when played effect is take control of a token upgrade on a unit and attach it to a different eligible unit. So this comes in shielded, so what you can do is actually move this shield onto anything that you want. So being able to move this shield onto a sentinel is extremely powerful, and there are a good number of 3-cost sentinels floating around in the game. So yeah, you play your 3-cost sentinel, it's still alive. You then play this out straight away in your next phase. Give that a shield, and then they've got a much harder roadblock to get through. So yeah, I do see this as being extremely good. You could also steal a shield from your opponent and put it on your sentinel, and then this keeps its own shield. So yeah, I see this as being quite a good utility unit to have in most decks, to be honest. The Banshee, so this is clearly made for Asajj because it is her ship for one thing, I'm pretty sure. And on attack, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the amount of damage on this unit, so it functions as a bit of aggressive removal. It's kind of similar to Casanton in that sense, but in space. It comes out on 5, Asajj comes out on 6, so you deploy this on 5, put her on it straight away in the next phase, and then you can go to the races and just keep damaging yourself, pinging enemy units, and yeah, just causing a bit of havoc, really. Munificent Frigate. So I don't often have what I call or refer to as stat sticks in my decks, and what I mean by stat stick is that it's just stats, it has no ability. But this could have a place in Asajj because, again, it comes out on 5. It has 4 power, which is the same as a Banshee, but it's got 7 health, so it's immune to takedown at that point. If you put Asajj on it, then it's a 7/11, so it'll have grit as well. So it's got a very, very high power ceiling. So I'm curious as to whether this does have a place in Asajj going forward. The other thing that you might want to look at is the fact that it's a capital ship. So with Piet, if you're going to do Piet Blue, then this can come out when you've got 4 resources, and again, it's a 4/7, so your opponent isn't going to be able to use Fell Dragon or Takedown on it. So that could be an option as well. And again, I don't tend to go for stat sticks, but I see a bit of potential with this, and it's Separatist as well. So again, Dooku Blue, this can come out on 3 resources if you're able to exploit it out. So yeah, I think overall, as stat sticks go, this has pretty good utility, I think. Corporate Light Cruiser. So this is actually very useful for me in my games quite a few times, just to do a bit of removal, and then it's got 5 power to just keep smacking base. So that was very good. Again, this is really good for set 2 Boba because it can ambush in with 6 power. So yeah, pretty nasty. Onto the pilots, and I'm trying to think. I have a suspicion that I used or included way less pilots than most others did. I was going to say I don't know if I was right to do so. Maybe I wasn't, but I still won the day, so maybe I was. But anyway, Indoctrinated Conscript is just for this format. It's a draft card. It's not meant for competitive use, really. Interceptor Ace. You're never going to want to deploy this as a ground unit because it's terrible stats for 3 cost anyway, and grit when you've only got 3 health is again pretty rubbish, but its piloting is a 3 cost, and you get +2/+3 on the vehicle, but it also gains grit. So if we just have a quick look at some of the vehicles on here, so you could be giving some of your sentinels grit, and those are things that generally you're going to have to attack through, so they're getting more powerful as people are getting thrown into them, so that's pretty good. Putting it on the Banshee is going to be very good as well if you aren't able to put Asajj on it. So yeah, Interceptor Ace, it's a little bit expensive perhaps, but I do see a place, probably not a full 3 of because it's very situational, but yeah, I do see this as having some good potential. And again, with Asajj as well. Trace Martez. So her piloting cost is only 1, and yes, you only get a +1/+2 boost, but her on attack is you may heal 2 damage from any number of units. So it's not worded very well. It kind of reads like, oh, you can heal 2 damage from multiple different units. No, you can heal a total of 2 damage from up to 2 units. So you can heal 1 and 1, or you can heal 2, or you can heal 1. So she works quite well with Asajj in the fact that if you're doing her Asajj's ability of pinging your own unit, then you can shove this trace onto that vehicle and then start healing that. So you're getting damage on your opponent's units and helping to remove those, and then healing your own up with Trace Martez. Hell, it doesn't even have to be the same vehicle. She can just be on a different vehicle. Maybe you're damaging your own gritted vehicle, or non-gritted vehicle, whatever, and then you're just healing that up. So yeah, I think Trace Martez, again, maybe as a 2-of, would have a place in Asajj going forward, and I think she'll be quite versatile and can be in a number of different decks and leaders. Rose Tico is another one that this would probably work very well with. Onto the events. So Electromagnetic Pulse, deal 2 damage to a droid or vehicle unit and exhaust it. So in some instances that will finish it off, but the failsafe is that is exhausted at least, so then you can get rid of it another way. I don't see this as being a main deck card probably. I think sideboards at times it might find its way into there. Punch It, I think this is going to be a staple if you've got a lot of vehicles. It's a 1 cost plus 2 boost, so if you think about breaking in, yes, you don't get Saboteur, and breaking in is not limited to vehicles, but if you've got a lot of vehicles, then it doesn't really matter, does it? So yeah, it's just a cheaper attack boost. So I think this will become quite prevalent, and the art is chewy. It's clearly mainly intended for the hand leader who wants his deck to be full of odd cost cards. So yeah, I think Punch It is going to be extremely good. Repair is a reprint from set 1. The this set does seem to make things very quick, so having more restoring capabilities in your deck could become quite important. So Repair, I don't think it ever saw a whole lot of play. I've been putting it in quite a lot of my blue decks, to be honest, but yeah, this might see a little bit of resurgence. It also has the benefit with, if you're damaging your own unit with Asajj, then you might be able to repair that up. I think I did repair my base today, but I also used it when someone had a War Juggernaut out. And if you don't know what that card does, for every damaged unit that is on both sides, it gains +1 power. So if there's 5 damaged units and it includes itself, then it has 8 attack because it's got 3 base. So I actually repaired my opponent's unit so that it had 1 less power on the War Juggernaut, which doesn't feel great, but sometimes it's needs must. So the only out of aspect card that I used, which is, I usually have 2 of 3 in this sort of format, was System Shock. So defeat a non-leader upgrade attached to a unit. If you do, deal 1 damage to that unit. So this can be quite nice, where again with Asajj you're kind of chipping away at units. And then if they do put a pilot on it, they might think that they are safe, but you can just play System Shock, kill that pilot, do an extra damage to it, which might then finish that unit off. So System Shock, I'm undecided if this is, I was going to say, what's the other ones in red? There's Power Failure, which defeats any number of upgrades attached to a unit. I think it's generally going to be unlikely there will be more than 1 upgrade on a unit at any one point, apart from like shields and experience, of course. So yeah, this might be a better option than Power Failure because you are doing that damage as well. And if they've got a shield, then you could choose to defeat the upgrade underneath it if they've got a pilot, and then do 1 damage to get rid of a shield. So I think this could have some good utility. Whether it's a full 3 of, I'm not entirely sure. Heartless Tactics. So I didn't read this card properly at all, and I did not end up using it because I was so focused on the conditionality bit down here that I completely missed that it exhausts the unit, which could have been pretty useful, but again, I won the day, so it didn't matter. I will shut up about it at some point. Exhaust a unit and give it -2, -0 for this phase. And then, if it has 0 power and isn't a leader, you may return it to its owner's hand. So this is basically the villainy version of Clear the Field, but a lot worse and much more conditional in a way. So Clear the Field, if you remember, it's yellow heroism. You can return a unit that costs 3 or less to its owner's hand, and any other unit that is named that will also be returned to hand. So there is the risk that you're going to end up bouncing your own unit, but if you use it on something like the Falcon, you'll bounce every single Falcon to their owner's hand. So you might be bouncing 2 different 3-cost Falcons, you might be bouncing the 6-cost Falcon as well. So Clear the Field is miles better than this, but Villainy now has a cheap option to get a worse version of that, which, yeah, I mean, you can exhaust a unit, so that's probably the main thing you would use it for, but then we also have Asteroid Sanctuary for that, and that will give you potentially a shield as well. So yeah, I don't know if this will really see play. I guess the -2 could be useful if it's a Sentinel, and then you can punch into it and maybe your unit survives instead. So it might have some utility. I'm not entirely convinced. There is no escape. I feel quite big on this card. I might be completely wrong, but choose up to 3 units. Those units lose all abilities and can't gain abilities for this round. So the main thing I see this card for is if your opponent has got a particularly powerful leader out, like if they've put Luke onto, is it Red 5 in particular, then that unit can deal 5 damage. Actually, it can deal 2 damage to a damaged unit, I think, and 3 damage to just any unit. So that's 2 separate instances of units damage. So what you can do is play There Is No Escape, so that leader unit just becomes a stat stick, which seems to be my phrase of the day. Now, the other thing to note about this is that you can do it preemptively. So the new Boba leader in this set has a very powerful deploy ability when attached to a vehicle because it's like a mini overwhelming barrage. You can deal 4 damage to enemy units as you wish. So what you can do is preemptively, if they've only got 1 vehicle out, or you're pretty sure they're going to want to attach it to 1 vehicle in particular, you can play this in advance. Well, actually, because you can choose up to 3 units, it's very unlikely they will have 3 vehicles by the time Boba's coming out. So you can choose all of the vehicles they've got out, and then if Boba deploys onto any of those vehicles, it will not have the 4 damage power, 4 damage spread thing. So you might end up forcing them to deploy him on the ground instead. So yeah, There Is No Escape could be pretty useful. It's also good if your opponent's got like K2SO or Ruthless Raider, things that are quite tricky to kill, because then you're gonna get a bunch of damage onto your base. So you can use There Is No Escape to negate that and then just finish them off. So yeah, I think this card has quite a bit of utility. Sweep the Area. This is, in my opinion, yeah, a worse Clear the Field again. It's going to be very situational. It will be good if your opponent is playing tons of pilots onto their fighters, because those will be generally 3 or less cost of the unit. So it might have some use there, but then you could just play Waylay. And Waylay will be able to bounce things that cost more than 3. So yeah, it's an uncommon as well. Yeah, I'm highly situational. I don't see it really happening. I would just play Clear the Field in Hero. Direct hit, defeat a non-leader vehicle unit, so that's the only conditionality about it. If you're playing against a Piet deck, then you're going to want this. I think in a lot of other spots, Takedown will probably be able to do the same function. I think it might be more of a sideboard card to have 1 or 2 of in there. Maybe 1 of in the main deck, I don't know. But yeah, I'm for this set in isolation, then obviously it's excellent, but in terms of the wider game, yeah, I'm not entirely sure as of yet. Final event, no glory, only results. So this is going to be a guaranteed include in any blue villainy deck pretty much, because you take control of a non-leader unit, then defeat it. So anything like Lurking TIE Phantom or the new Chewbacca pilot unit that are normally immune to these kind of effects, well, because you are taking control of it, so it comes over to your side, so it is therefore a friendly unit, it loses that immunity and then it dies. So yeah, this is going to be an auto include in all of those blue villainy decks pretty much, and I would include it in Asajj as well. It's especially good with Thrawn because if you get a K2SO or Ruthless Raider, those are two I'm going to reference, then you also get the benefit of their when defeated instead of your opponent. And with Thrawn, you can trigger it twice. So yeah, if you take a K2SO, you can either choose to basically pillage them or do 6 damage to their base. So yeah, going to be very, very good and a new staple in blue villainy. The only non-pilot upgrade that I was playing was Indexed Crimson Dawn. So 2-cost yellow villainy, when attached unit readies, exhaust it unless its controller pays 2. So this makes your opponent think a little bit, which is never a bad thing, and that's kind of the same with indirect damage as well. The more your opponent, I guess, the more decisions your opponent is having to make, the less time they have to think about what they are actually going to play themselves, and they might be prone to making more mistakes. It's going to be an interesting thing if there was some kind of psychological study about that. But it's kind of similar to Frozen in Carbonite. Frozen in Carbonite is a permanent exhaust until it's removed. But if your opponent is going to choose to pay the 2, then they are going to be playing under curve. So they might actually be doing themselves a disadvantage rather than just leaving it exhausted, which, you know, they're not going to want to do. But yeah, this combined with Frozen in Carbonite could help you get to the late game if that is what your deck is going for. So I guess if you're playing Piet Yellow, maybe, then you could have this and Frozen in Carbonite and Waylay and No Good to Me Dead just to completely stall out until you get to your capital ship bombs like Devastator or Relentless. And to be honest, I would play capital ships that are out of aspect by 1 because Piet can cancel 1 of those out or 2 of those costs out when he's out. So yeah, possibly going to see some use. Maybe not a full 3 of in a lot of decks, but could be an option. So yeah, I'm just going to go over some final thoughts, and this was the most enjoyable pre-release I've been to. I didn't make it to a set 1 because I don't think I actually knew this game existed at that point. I was a little bit of a latecomer to it. So why did I think it's the most enjoyable one I've gone to? So at set 2, I think probably the main issue with that pre-release is the existence of rivals fall in that set. So you're generally going to be quite excited to use your leaders, and a card that can just defeat the leader, no questions asked, is not particularly fun. So that was probably, it's probably not a mistake having that card in general, but it being a common, meaning that you were likely to have it at pre-release, yeah, that might have been an oversight. Set 3, I think the main issue with that set was the fact that Anakin was just clearly the best leader for pre-release, and I mean, I'm guilty of picking Anakin at the last pre-release, and I did win. So yeah, but otherwise, I think it would have been a lot better probably. I still enjoyed it quite a lot, but yeah, so it's probably been this set, then set 3, and then set 2 in terms of enjoyability, personally speaking. I think, and I kind of suspected this beforehand, unless you're going like with Wedge as your leader, I think pilots in moderation is going to be the way to go. I think you're going to have to pick your moment, and yeah, I think if you go all in on pilots, you're probably going to come unstuck. Whilst the focus of this set in general is space, in quite a few of the games, both arenas were very relevant. So, and I expect that to be the case going forwards. I think that there might be an initial boom in space whilst we're all excited about this set, but I think it will settle down and it will be much closer. It'll be the closest to a 50-50 split that we've ever had in this game. I suspect it's probably going to be more of a 65-35 split, maybe. But I mean, up until now, you could quite easily have a deck with only like 8 space units and be all right. I think that's going to be very difficult to be that heavily slanted going forward. So I think that will help to keep the game more unpredictable and more varied, and just provides more options really. This set I think does have quite a lot of power potential, and it does kind of make sense because I think we all agree that Spark of Rebellion has probably been in general the most powerful set thus far. And if we think about their rotation plans, it's on a 2-year cycle. So in a year, this will be the equivalent of what Spark of Rebellion was. It's going to be the set that is around for the most time in its cycle. So if we think about it in that sense, then if this is the most powerful set out of the next 5 to come, then that wouldn't be too surprising. And just on Asajj specifically, I think I said earlier that I think red is probably her best combination. And guess what? Her ability is yet another early Tarkin Town enabler. So yeah, I think the next thing I do is probably going to be building an Asajj red deck. It will not have tons of jump to Lightspeed cards, unfortunately, because I do not have a box yet, but I'm sure there are a decent number of things that I can fit into it and then revisit it in the future. But yeah, I one thing I am looking forward to rotation is Tarkin Town and Energy Conversion Lab no longer being in place, because yes, whilst I do use them, it will be nice to have games just start a little bit differently and potentially end a little bit differently. And it will also, it should give the designers more freedom with what they are able to create, because there's only so many pinging effects they can do because of Tarkin Town. They can't make all the 2 and 1 cost have that kind of effect. And similarly with on attack and when played abilities on units that are 6 cost or less, they're limited, because if you've got Energy Conversion Lab, you might make a broken unit if it's got a when played and on attack that's particularly ridiculous. Wrecker is probably, well, Wrecker is pushing it really, because he's probably overstated as it is. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. This is supposed to be about pre-release rather than the state of the game in general. But yeah, let me know how your pre-releases went. What leaders are you most excited for? As I think the next video that I will be doing is an Asajj, as in set 4 Asajj, and it will be a red deck, and there will be some gritted units going on. So let me know what you think about set 4 in general, etc. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video.